Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel Data Analysis with Dr. Veronica. In this video, we would learn how to use the offset function in Microsoft Excel. So we imagine the offset function to be like an address that basically tells Excel where to go starting from a particular location. So this is what the offset function is, and with examples we will see how to use the offset function in data analysis. We would also understand how to interpret the offset function syntax arguments. We would learn to use the offset function in this video. We will also combine the offset function with the sum function, the average function, and most importantly, we will see how to make the offset function to be very dynamic with the match, count, and count A functions. If you're just coming to this YouTube channel for the first time, please subscribe to this YouTube channel to support what we do, and also give us a thumbs up so that the YouTube algorithm will pull up this video anytime somebody is searching for the offset function usage in Microsoft Excel. Let us get right into it. The first example that we would look at is using the offset function to get a specific reference. In front of us is a consolidated profit and loss statement for a fictitious company for a 7-year period. And we want to use the offset function to extract this information. We want to get the revenue only for the year 2019, and we want to get the gross profit only for the year 2021. This is what we would do with the offset function. The first argument is the reference. This argument tells us the starting point from where we want to offset our rows and columns from. It is the starting point. So the starting cell where you want to offset your rows and columns is the reference. And in this case, of course, you must choose a starting point with the reference function. And I would like my starting point to be this. Cell B9 is my starting point in this example. I use the comma separator, and the next argument in this syntax is the rows argument, which tells us how many rows away from the starting point that we want to offset, right? How many rows from the starting point do we want to offset? In this particular example, we are not going rows away from the starting point. So we use 0 in this case because we are not going rows away from the starting point. The next argument is columns. How many columns from the starting point do you want to offset? Now, in this case, we want the revenue for year 2019, which is this. If we count the number of columns where 2019 is, which is column E, and of course, the starting point is in column B, right? So the number of columns from the starting point is 1, 2, 3, not including the starting point. Away from the starting point, how many columns do we have? Okay, so the result that we seek to have is in column E, which is 3 columns away from the starting point. 1, 2, 3. So here we put 3. And we can see that the last 2 arguments, which is the height argument and the width argument, are optional arguments. So this means that we can ignore these arguments and the offset function will work perfectly fine. Of course, we will see other examples where we will use the height and the width arguments and also see how it works. We would explain how this can be applied in using the offset function. So I just close the bracket and I hit the enter button. Just like we can see right here, the revenue in the year 2019, of course, is 43,388.81, exactly the information that we have right here. So this is the revenue, okay? This particular number is what we have gotten so far using the offset function. Okay, so we will go to a second example to determine the gross profit in the year 2021 using the same logic as we used in the first case. So we do the equal to sign, which is compulsory every time you have to enter a function, and you type offset, you open the bracket. And in this case, of course, the reference is the starting point, and I choose cell B9 to be my reference, which is the starting point. I use the comma separator, and in this case, the gross profit away from the starting point is on the second row from the starting point, right? So we have row number one, row number two away from the starting point. So the number of rows in this case will be 2, and the column's argument, the gross profit is in column G. And if you start to count from the starting point, okay, so the starting point is not included in the counting because the starting point is 0. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, gross profit year 2021 is in column G, which is number 5, like so, and you close the bracket, and let us see what we have. The gross profit in year 2021 is this, okay, which is what we have been able to get using the offset function. So this is just a basic example on how to use the offset function to get a specific reference from a huge range of data that you have. In this example, we would look at how to use the offset function optimally by embedding the offset function in other functions. So we would merge the offset function and the sum function to see what we can use it for. In this case, of course, we have this profit and loss statement for 7 years, and we want to get the total of these subheads for the first 5 years. Okay, we want to get this without making use of the sum function. We want to embed the offset function in this case. So how do we do this? Of course, you start by typing the equal to sign, and you type the offset, you open the bracket. So before I proceed on this, just to let you know that the offset function can make your workbook to be a bit slower, because every time you open your workbook, the offset function does a recalculation, right? So this is just to let you know. So I'm going to do the sum, okay, because we're trying to embed offset inside the sum function. And this I want to get for the first 5 years. So of course I'm choosing this as the first year, and I put the colon sign, and here I would type offset like this, open the bracket. The reference is the starting point, which of course is the revenue for 2016. I put the comma separator. I am going to do 0 rows because I want to get the revenue, okay, the sum, the total of the revenue for the first 5 years. And the column would be, I would just come and select this, okay. I already have numbers fixed here, and I'm doing this because I want to make it more dynamic. So I'm going to press F4 to fix that particular cell, and I put I close the first bracket and I close the second one, and I hit the enter button on my keyboard. Now this is the total revenue for the first 5 years. Of course, we know the first 5 years is 2016 to 2020. And you can see on my status bar, the sum of the selected cells is this. This is just a random check, okay? And this means the offset function has given us, embedding the offset function in the sum function has given us this value. I'm going to drag down this function so that we see what the total is for other subheads like cost of goods sold, gross profit, marketing expenses, and so on. So we go to the next example, which is embedding the offset function in the average function, okay? So it's going to follow the same logic as the sum. And in this case, I'm just going to type average, open my bracket. I choose the first number that, of course, I want to get the average from, and I type in the offset function, open the bracket. My reference is my starting point, which I have just selected right here. The number of rows would be 0 because I want it to start from the starting cell. And I put the comma separator, the number of columns in this case. So I want to get the average of these subheads for the first 4 years. not the first 5 years this time. I use the F4 button on my keyboard to fix that cell, and I close the first bracket, close the second one, hit the enter button on my keyboard, and this is what I have as my average revenue from 2016 to 2019. So I have just selected these 4 cells. Looking at my status bar to see the average of the selected cells gives me the same value. So I know that I am correct. All I just need to do right now is to drag down this function, and I have the average for the first 4 years for other subheads. Now, how do we take care of this hashtag div over 0 exclamation mark? Of course, we can take care of this by just adding the if error function. Okay, the if error function is one of the functions in Microsoft Excel that returns a value. You can tell Excel to return a specific value if the result that comes up at the end of the day is an error. Instead of giving you this error message, okay, it will return this particular value for you. So I open the bracket, and my entire input here is my value. I just come after the second bracket, use the comma separator, and I am going to specify to Excel what value will it show to me if it is an error. So I can put a 0 there and close the bracket, and this is what I have. So of course I can drag this down so that it will be affected in this place as well. And just to dive deep into the if error function a little bit more, I can write a text. I can say, if you find an error, give me this, let's say check, something like this. Okay, check, just like so, and I put in the bracket. Okay, so this is what I have. Every time Excel experiences an error, so instead of turning up an error message for me, it will tell me to check instead. We will use more examples to see how we can use the offset function together with other functions to get even better results with Microsoft Excel. So right here, we're looking for the total sales for the first 6 months. And we will make use of the last 2 optional arguments, which we did not use in our previous example. So total sales, which is basically the sum. And I'll just start with this, open the bracket and type offset, open the bracket for the first 6 months. So for sales, I would prefer this to be my reference, which is the starting point. I put the comma separator. I want to get the total sales for the first 6 months. So I want Excel to, of course, consider for me the sales value, or to add the sales beginning from this one. Okay, beginning from cell B2, okay, up to cell B7. This is the total sales that I want to get. So this means my rows will be 1, and for the columns, I am staying in the same column. So I'm going to put a 0. Now to the next argument, which is the height. The height argument basically explains how many rows you want to consider in your range. Okay, in this case, how many rows do we want to sum? We want to sum 6 rows. Okay, or 6 cells, just like this, okay, which ends up to be in 6 rows. So my height will be 6. And for the width, it tells you how many columns you want to consider in the range of what you want to do. In this case, we are summing, and what we want to add, it's all in the same column, okay, which is column B. So this means the width is 1. Now, just to point out that these last 2 optional arguments can never be 0. It always has to be a positive number or a negative number, which we will see in other examples. So I close the first bracket, I close the second one, I hit the enter button on my keyboard, and this is the result that I have. I want to do a quick check just to be sure that what I have done is correct. So I select all first 6 cells, which is for the sales column, and checking my status bar, this is what I have, which is the same result that I have right here. So I'm just going to zoom this. Okay, this is already zoomed out. And I'll proceed to the next example, which is getting the average budget for the first 3 months. Okay, so I'll start with doing the average. Open the bracket, type offset, open the bracket, and my starting point will be this. Okay, I prefer my starting point to be as close as possible to the range of cells that I want to carry out the operation on. My starting point is that, and my rows, I'm going to put 1 because I want Excel to give me the average for the first 3 months, beginning from, of course, cell C2. Okay, so I'll choose a 1, put the comma separator. The column is the same, so it goes for 0. And in the situation for height, because I want to consider only the average for just 3 rows, my height will be 3 and my width will be 1 because I am staying in the same column. Okay, just like so. I close the second bracket, I press the enter button on my keyboard, and this is what I have. So if I do a quick check just by selecting the first 3 budget amounts and I look at my status bar, this is the same information that I have here. Now we're going to the next example, which is getting the average sales for the last 6 months. Okay, now I am going to start with average, type offset, open the bracket, average. So this is average sales. So this is going to be my reference. Okay, that's my starting point. But in this situation, how do we get the sales for the last 6 months? Because it's very specific. And how do we even make it dynamic so that every time we add data to this data that we have right here, we are always going to get the average sales for the last 6 months only? In this case, we can use the count function to determine how many cells have information, okay? And then from the total number of cells that we have information, we do a sort of we specify for Excel to go 6 cells above, okay, or 6 cells into the number of cells we have from the bottom. Okay, let us use this example to see how this works. I have the reference selected, the number of rows. In this case, we are going to use the count function. Okay, so I want Excel to give me how many values is contained in this row. And I am adding extra cells because I expect to top up information in what I have in the future. Okay, and I close this. So basically, if we do only the count function, we are going to see that in column B, the count function will give us 16. So we can just quickly do that right away. So I just do count, open the bracket, select all the values right here. Okay, I close this, and like I said, this is what I have, 16. So just so you know that the count function gives you only the total number of cells with information. So regardless of the fact that I selected empty cells, it is giving me the total number of cells that has only information. Okay, so we go back to getting the average sales for the last 6 months. So I type here average, open the bracket, and I put offset. I open the bracket for the offset and average sales. So this is going to be my reference, which is my starting point. I use the comma separator, and for the rows, I use the count function to get this, and I select and I add even more empty cells because when I do update in the future, okay, this function is expected to be dynamic. I close the bracket for the count function, and that is the number of rows. Now for the column, I put a 0 because I am staying in the same column. I put the comma separator. Now for the height, I want to get the average sales for the last 6 months. So I am going to do -6, okay? And I will put the comma separator, and my width is 1. I close the first bracket and I close the second one, and I hit the enter button on my keyboard. So what -6 in this example, what it does is that it is telling, so basically I am telling Excel that out of the 16 items in this cell, I want you to give me the sum of 6 cells beginning from the last. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And like I mentioned, when you use a negative for this argument, which is the height, so it considers the height, from the last. So it gives you the total number of rows from coming from the last to the top. Okay, so this is what the negative value does. As per the positive one, it gives you from where you have identified going downwards. This one gives you from where you have identified going upwards. So this is what we have right here. Now, just to say, let's assume that we have another data right here, which is for May 2022. And here I put 500,000, just like so. We can see that, okay, this value has changed because basically I'm asking Excel to give me the average sales for the last 6 months. So the function has automatically updated itself to give me the average for this last 6 months instead. Okay, which is what I have right here, okay, in my status bar, and this is what I have. So if I take this out, if I just delete this, okay, you can see that the result has updated itself automatically. So we are going to do another example, which is getting the total sales for the last 4 months. And we will also see with another example how this works. So sum, and I open the bracket, I type offset, I open the bracket again, and for this one I want to get the sales. So this is going to be my starting point. For the number of rows, I want Excel to count all the rows that has information, and in this example I am using the count A function. Now count A also counts cells that has text and values. The count function gives you the total number of cells that has only values, numeric values, but the count A function gives you the total number of cells that has both text and numeric values. So in our example, it's going to be the same because we don't have any cell in this selection that I have just done right here that contains a text. So I close the count A function and I put the comma separator. For the column, I use a 0. For the height, I want the total sales for the last 4 months. So I'm going to choose -4 so that I can get the total sales, okay, beginning from the last and taking it upwards. So 1, 2, 3, 4, -4. If it's +4, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so but minus takes it from here upwards. 1, 2, 3, 4, just like this. And I am going to put the comma separator. The width, which is the number of columns I am considering in this case, is just 1. So I put that as the width, and I close the first and the second brackets, and this is what I have. So I'm just going to format this with a comma, and let us do a manual check to see what this comes out to be. So in my status bar, I can see that I have the same value that I have right here. In this last example, we will see how we can make the offset function even more dynamic. So for the previous examples, we have seen how to add, how to get total sales, average budget for first or last number n months. In this case, we are going to see how to get the total sales, okay, for a particular number of months starting from a specific month. Okay, so I type the equal to function and I do the sum. I open the bracket, I type offset, I open the bracket. Now I want the total sales, so I'm going to use this as my starting point because I like it to be as close to the range as possible. Now for the rows, how am I going to tell Excel that please give me the sum of values beginning from this particular value right here? Okay, beginning from this particular value, which is in this specific location. Okay, the function that I can use to achieve this is the match function, which is going to specify the location of what I want, so that Excel will look from that location and give me exactly what I want. So I'm going to use the match function here. I open the bracket, and this is going to be my lookup value. I use the comma separator, and the lookup array is basically the column that contains my lookup value. And I have selected my lookup array, and the match type will be exact match. I close this bracket. I use the comma separator. I go to the next argument, which is a column. In this case, it is 0 because I am not moving columns at all. Now for the height, I need the total sales for the first 6 months beginning from March 2021. So my height is 6, and my width, because I am working with only one column, okay, of course my total sales, my sales figure is only in one column. So I am going to put 1 right here, close the first bracket, close the second one, and I hit the enter button on my keyboard, and this is the result that I have. So let us do a quick check. Beginning from March 2021, this is the first, okay? This is the sale for March 2021, and taking it down 6 up to August, okay? Just selecting all those cells, look at the status bar. This is the result that I have. So of course, this is how to use the offset function to achieve even more optimal results in Microsoft Excel. And just so you know, the offset function is often said to delay your workbook whenever you open your workbook, because it does a form of a recalculation every time you open your workbook that contains the offset function. But personally, I like to not use the offset function too much, not to overuse it. But in my experience, the offset function has been great, and I'm sure that with these examples that you have, you can use the offset function to achieve very excellent results in your working in Microsoft Excel. The link to this practice file is in the description box. So as you watch this video, do well to download the practice file so that you can practice along. And of course, if you're just coming to my YouTube channel for the first time, please subscribe, because there are amazing contents on this YouTube channel to help you master your use of Microsoft Excel.